Well, there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to be a championship playoff final between Luton Town and Coventry City. In today's video, we're going to be taking a bit of a deeper dive into each side's season so far and how they've made it to this point. Next week, I'll have my full preview for the match itself coming out, and I'd like some early shots from you guys down below who you are fancying. But make no mistake about it, this year in the championship for the playoffs has been the year of the underdog. Two quite incredible stories, and we'll delve a little bit deeper into why this has been such a miraculous season for both Luton and Coventry throughout the video. But regardless of who goes up from this point, it's going to be absolutely awesome to see either Cov or Luton in the Premier League next year. Of course, the crazy context behind all of this was that both sides were playing in League 2 in the 17/18 season, both promoted alongside each other, and the rapid rise to stardom in the championship that they've had from that point has been absolutely bonkers, to say the least. So if you do going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular championship content. Without any further ado, let's jump in. We'll start out with Coventry, as that was the game that took place last night. Commiserations to Middlesbrough fans, but I thought Coventry played the two legs to an absolute T, and fair play, because I did have Middlesbrough as my personal favourites coming into that second leg after the first game at Coventry had ended goalless with how good Borough had been at home under Michael Carrick this season. I thought that despite that Coventry backline that has been so sturdy throughout the season, one of Akpom, Giles or Archer would be able to conjure up something to break that deadlock. But the matchup in the first place was an absolutely fascinating one, and we saw over the two legs just how brilliant defensively Coventry actually were. They limited Middlesbrough to just 3 shots on target over both home and away matches, which is amazing considering how free scoring that Borough side have been this season, and like we say, how many attacking threats they actually have in their side. This Coventry side have kept 20 clean sheets in the league this season, and I mean, watching them over those 90 minutes, it's no surprise to see why. Then having the moment of quality, it's Gyökeres and Hamer linking up, the two magic men in the final third, and a brilliant finish by Gus Hamer, one of the best players in the EFL over these last couple of years and could be pivotal to that final game at Wembley now. The first thing to me that really springs off the page, and the job that Mark Robins has done, is this is the transfer business that Coventry have done throughout the season, so both in the summer and in January, and Robins has had to pull together a squad based on free transfers and loan players. Over the last 3 or 4 seasons, they're working with a net spend which is way in the positives as well. Let's also take into consideration they sold Dom Hyam, you know, potentially their best defender from last season as well, to go ahead and fund all of this. So finance in the championship, there's a lot of talking about the imbalances, but there are still ways that you can go ahead and catch up if you do that smart recruitment and you have a clear plan behind the scenes, like Coventry obviously do with Mark Robins and this continual improvement that they've just had season upon season. Since Coventry have been promoted to the championship, they've only spent over £1 million on 2 players, which is amazing considering their rapid rise and the general resources of other sides who they've been up against in the playoff race this season. Those 2 players being Victor Gyökeres and Gus Hamer. Hamer came in their first season back up in the championship, then they got Gyökeres on a permanent basis in that second season. And since that time, taking also into consideration their final season in League 1, they've had sales like they sold Sam McCallum for about 4 million, Tom Bayliss for about 1.8 million, Dom Hyam for around 1.8 as well. So they're well in the positives in terms of their overall net spend. I also think the overall core of this Coventry squad is really strong. Of course, the Stardust players are Victor Gyökeres and Gus Hamer, and we can see how much of an impact they've had this season because of the goal contributions. 21 goals, 11 assists for Gyökeres is an absolute joke, as is, I mean, Gus Hamer now into double figures for goals and assists with 10 and 10. But the overall spine of that squad, I think, is quite underrated, and how they've carefully gone about adding to it over the years. And some of the players who have really stepped up this season, if we think of, you know, the likes of Ben Wilson, who was on backup duty last season, someone like Josh Eccles, who's just gone from strength to strength this season, and then how they've really added to that with some quality loanees, especially in those defensive positions, with how good Callum Doyle's been on loan from Man City, or Luke McNally on loan from Burnley. It's a squad which, to me, doesn't have any massive egos. It's all knitted together quite well, with someone then like Wood McFadzean at the back, who's got that experience alongside the younger lads. And it's all been knitted together perfectly by Mark Robins, a hard-working spine who wants to put their bodies on the line. They've got a clear defensive structure and then are so lethal on those breaks. And a big reason why I think there are no egos in this Coventry squad is when we have a look over their weekly wages. I mean, this is a squad which shouldn't be anywhere near the top 6 based on this sort of spend. And if we compare it to some of the others who they have been up against in the top 6 race this season, they're only paying 2 players 10 grand a week, and then everyone below that is quite substantially below that actually. Coventry do have one of the lowest weekly wage bills in the Championship. In terms of wages being spent, I think it was only Rotherham in the Championship who have a lower weekly wage bill than Coventry do, which is astonishing. So make no mistake about it, this is a miraculous rise from Coventry over the years, and all at a time where they've had massive issues with things going on behind the scenes. We also what was happening with the stadium at the start of this season and that ownership struggle that they've had going on for the last few years. It's a group of supporters as well who are massively passionate, always make a bunch of noise both at home and on the road, and I mean, I can't wait to see what sort of atmosphere they're going to cook up at Wembley, because I'm sure it's going to be absolutely special. And then we'll flip over to Luton, and fair play for turning things around in the second leg, because I did have some doubts after how the first leg at the Stadium of Light went. You know, Luton started that game very well, but the second half, that Luton midfield just looked a little bit leggy, and ultimately Sunderland had a bit too much time on the ball and could have had a few more goals in that first leg. But getting the first goal down at the Kenny was absolutely crucial, and Luton went ahead and did that. And from that point onwards, they just didn't let that Sunderland side breathe. We said going into the game that defending aerial duels and set piece scenarios was going to be a weakness for Sunderland, and once again Luton took full advantage of that. But where I was most impressed with that Luton squad was their midfield looked back to their biting best in this one. Clever little tactical fouls here and there, and not letting Sunderland get up ahead of gear in the positions where they could have gone ahead and hurt them. You know, where I saw Luton potentially struggling was I thought that Sunderland would get at least one goal in that game, but they just shut down each of Sunderland's attacking threats. We saw after the game Tony Mowbray speaking about the sort of intensity of Kenilworth Road and how that maybe got to some of the Sunderland players, how close you are to the action on the pitch there, and that tightness really came across in the game actually, and Luton just executed that game plan perfectly, and it has set up a bit of an ideal Championship playoff final in terms of the two real underdogs of this season going toe to toe with each other, with Luton up against Coventry. Once again, if we do look at the business that Luton did in the summer transfer window, there are a few parallels that we can draw between Luton and Coventry here. A lot of the squad been put together over the years, you know, sort of through loanees and through free transfers. Was a little bit more money spent at Luton this summer compared to Coventry, but we'll dive into some of the reasons why that was the case. And obviously the main standing in the end being Carlton Morris, and what an addition he's been to that side this season. We saw in his Barnsley days the potential of the player, of what he could be at Championship level, but this season we've just seen his output absolutely explode. Some other really clever pickups in that bunch as well. Cully Woodrow, who's chipped in, Alfie Dougherty, who's been brilliant on that left-hand side, and also playing the loan market really well, like Coventry have, with Ethan Horvath, Cody Drama, and potentially the best of them all, Marvellous Nakamba, who I think's been an absolute linchpin in that midfield since he arrived in January. Have Luton afforded all this? Well, they have had notable sales over the past few transfer windows, and since that season in League One and back up to the Championship. Let's not forget this was a side who lost James Bree in the January transfer window to Southampton, who was a massive part of that squad in the first half of the season. They're going back, sales of the likes of James Justin and Jack Stacey also bringing in huge figures. And Luton have just carefully added to their squad year on year. Even the players that they have lost, they've adequately replaced. If we think of, you know, Cal Naismith and James Bree and how well they've done to replace those stars. Once again, looking at that Luton side, what shines through to me, and similar to the Coventry squad, is a lack of ego. I think that's been a bit of a problem with some of the sides coming down from the Premier League in the previous season, you know, the Norwiches and the Watfords, and where they've gone wrong in some instances, but everyone willing to fight and play for the shirt. I think Luton have got one of the most underrated midfields in the Championship. The likes of Alan Campbell, Pelly Ruddock, one of my favourite players. Love the story of him from National League to the Championship. And like we were mentioning before, Marvellous Nakamba and what he's actually added into that midfield since his arrival in January. A bit more calmness, but similarly to the others that he's playing alongside, a brilliant work rate off the ball as well, which also helps. And then the real stardust up front, which has been Carlton Morris this season, 20 goals, 7 assists. Elijah Adebayo, well, he's not got the same numbers as Morris, 8 goals, 4 assists this season. I think it's just been as useful in terms of getting into positions, being a real handful for centre halves. And the positions he takes up as well, I think his movement's so underrated. You know, he ran rings around us at Deepdale and could have had 2 or 3 goals on that day, to be honest. And then the back line, which has just been so sturdy this season and has really been led by Tom Lockyer. And in terms of weekly wages, Luton also working with one of the lowest budgets in the Championship. Obviously, the outlier here is Marvellous Nakamba, who is on loan from Aston Villa, so Luton won't be covering that 29k that he's on a week. Villa, I'd imagine, would still be covering the majority of that. And Ethan Horvath, who's also on loan from Nottingham Forest, so they're only earners that are making more than 10 grand a week. Luton aren't paying all the money towards that, as they're both on loan. And then everyone after that, below their 9 grand figure, Colly Woodrow, they're the highest earner that they actually pay, who came in the summer in 8.4k a week. When we consider the bulk of the squad who have really been key to this side this season are around the 5k a week mark, it's staggering stuff. And you look into the ridiculous figures that other sides in the Championship really are paying, and this, I think, perfectly paints the picture of the underdog story and what Luton have really been up against and how clever they've actually been with their recruitment and how they've steadily grown as a club over the years. But guys, there we have it. 2 quite unbelievable stories coming from the Championship this season. I can't wait to see how it ends next weekend at Wembley. I'm not expecting the greatest spectacle in terms of the actual 90 minutes that we'll get to witness at Wembley. I think it'll be very cagey and close between the two sides, but whoever's promoted from this point, I think will have thoroughly deserved it, given the vast overachievement at both clubs over these past few years. So if you did go on to enjoy today's video, guys, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.